Shakyamuni Buddha. Good afternoon, everyone, and a couple of guests that we have here today in person for the first time in quite some time. So before I get started on our Dharma talk, please join me in invoking our teacher's name 3 times. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. So today I'll be talking about the 3 refuges. So in taking refuge in the 3 jewels, or the triple gem, as it's sometimes called. I've gotten this question a couple of times in the past, and I've answered it offline. And I've spoken briefly about it a few weeks ago when we were going over some questions from my book. But I'll hopefully try to elaborate again this time. So taking refuge in the 3 jewels. So that is, the 3 jewels is the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And it is the most ancient tradition in Buddhist practice, in Buddhism. Taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha was, and still is, one of the first vows that any Buddhist would take, whether to become a Buddhist or to, back in the Buddha's day, to ordain as a monk or nun. They simply just had to take refuge in the 3 jewels. But since then, as things expanded and precepts were made, the Buddha created the 5 precepts for all the monastics and for those that newly came into the practice. And as well now, we take 3 refuge and 5 precepts for the lay people when they officially convert to Buddhism or become part of the Sangha, the temple. Nowadays, traditionally, that's what indicates someone as a Buddhist, is by taking the 3 refuge and the 5 precepts, or at least 4 of the precepts. So that tradition has continued until today, which I believe is one of the most beautiful rituals or ceremonies you can do, is to take refuge. So when we take refuge in the Buddha, you're going to get a million different interpretations and ways of describing it, depending on who you're asking, depending on where you go. It depends on the tradition, of course, as well. But generally speaking, when we take refuge in the Buddha, we're not necessarily taking refuge in the actual figurative historical Buddha, but more so in the characteristics that kind of emanate a Buddha, or what a Buddha is, and specifically in the practice. So when we take refuge to the Buddha, or when we bow 3 times, right, we're bowing 3 times to represent the 3 jewels. So when we're bowing, we're not bowing in worship. We're not submitting ourselves to the Buddha. Instead, we are just trying to bring to mindfulness the characteristics that create a Buddha. What does a Buddha represent, right? If we read about the Buddha or we see the Buddha statue, it should bring to mind the beauty of Buddhism, the beauty of what creates what makes a Buddha so magnificent, right? So when we give rise to the Buddha, when we take refuge in the Buddha, when we bow to the Buddha, we are simply just bringing to mind the characteristics of the Buddha. So what are some characteristics of the Buddha, right? So as we read Buddhism, we learn what really inspired the Buddha, right? Ultimately, he became a Buddha, or he left his, fabulous, luxurious life and became an ascetic and a mendicant and a monk, and then, of course, eventually the Buddha, is because he wanted to find a way out of suffering. So that really is our main motivation when we take refuge, is to follow the path that the Buddha created for us, so we can alleviate our suffering the same way that he did. So we just have to remember, it's not submitting to the Buddha. We're not worshiping or bowing down specifically for the Buddha, but the things that kind of make the Buddha. It should be the motivation behind the practice itself, right? which is to eliminate our suffering, and eliminate the dissatisfactions and the desires of life. And when we take refuge in the Dharma, which is his teachings, right? His teachings are the way that allowed him, and it will allow everyone else, to escape that suffering. So he's created, or he taught us the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. That is the most foundational teaching that you have to be able to really understand truly, deeply, and really master the meaning of those before you can really venture into any other teachings that are out there. Because the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path is the teaching. Everything else that he taught, everything else that we read and we study and practice stems from the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path. So without a clear, deep understanding of those teachings, you really will, it'll become very difficult for you to learn or practice other things, because you really have to have that foundation, a deep knowledge of those teachings first. And fortunately for us, the Buddha used expedient means, right? He used parables and similes, and he used different ways to teach people, because not everybody learns and understands the same way, right? So when he was teaching to, people of royalty or high-ranking officers or whatever, right, we assume they have a little bit more knowledge of the world and education. So he teaches them in a way that it's a little bit higher that they can understand, right? Versus people who he was teaching in villages or small towns where they may have not had access to education, or they may not even be able to read or write or any of those other stuff, right? So we've taught different ways. So there's a lot of teachings. There's hundreds of teachings, different ways of teaching, but really the ultimate moral of the story is the same. So when we read books and the sutras where they say there's 84,000 Buddha doors, Dharma doors, right? That means there's 84,000 different ways to learn the Dharma, right? Because there's just different ways. Not everyone learns the same, right? You may learn better for more complicated technical stuff versus someone else who just needs a simple list of something, or the simple stuff to understand. So there's 84,000 ways to learn the Dharma, which sounds like a whole load of Dharma, but it kind of really is, because Buddhism is very extensive. It's very complex when it comes to the core teachings, the deep advanced teachings, right? So when you start learning about Buddhist psychology and the Abhidharma, which is the Buddhist psychology, and go into deeper teachings like emptiness and all the other advanced teachings, it becomes easier for us when we get to those to really be able to comprehend and take it in, as long as we've studied all the preliminary prerequisites first, right? So that's why when people come in and they say, where do I start? Or, how do I even start? Because there's so much, right? It becomes very distracting. It becomes very confusing when you really don't know where to go first. So I always, always, always emphasize you have to start with the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And that is your first and only task for at least 1 year, right? Because if you think about it, if you study the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path, if you study one truth a month and one path a month, that's going to take up a whole year, right? And it really does need that much time for you to really be able to comprehend it, to really deeply understand it and be able to practice it and meditate on it. It does take that long. So that is my very first rule of thumb for newcomers, or for anybody interested in wanting to learn more or start somewhere, right? Then when we take refuge in the Sangha is very important. It is the community of practitioners. So it's a community of monks and nuns and the laymen and laywomen, right? The fourfold Sangha. And you really can't have one refuge without the other, right? They all interconnect, because if we're taking refuge in the Buddha, the practice, you need the Dharma to support the practice, and then you need the Sangha to support the Dharma. you can attempt to study on your own and practice on your own. You may be able to do that for some time, but eventually you're going to need some help and some guidance and some assistance, and really can only get that from qualified teachers or from a sangha. And that will give you the necessary guidance, the helpfulness, right? You have other people to help guide you in the right direction. You have other people to kind of take point on your practice, right? So if we need some changes, or feel like there's some changes or some corrections that we need to correct, in someone's understanding of something, or if they need, a more elaborate explanation or a simplified explanation of something, the Sangha members are there to help, right? Since we all learn different ways and comprehend in different ways, you're going to have different interpretations of things from different people, which, as long as they're in one Sangha, typically they should be learning the same way, right? So they should all have the same outcome of the answer, but just different ways to interpret it. And that's very helpful, because I may be very technical where Leon's very simplified, and you may learn better from him than me, or the other way around, right? So the Sangha is there to support you, to help guide you. And it's something that the Buddha has always emphasized, right? There was a story of one time there was a sick monk in one of the monasteries, right? So while the Buddha and all the other monks were out doing alms, right, they're getting food, the sick monk stayed back, and when the Buddha came, he saw the sick monk. His robes were dirty, his area was dirty, it was messy, and the Buddha asked him, "What's wrong?" He was like, "I'm sick. That first the monks, my brothers, were helping me take care of me, but as I got sicker and wasn't getting any better, I told them I would take care of myself." And so the Buddha and his attendant Ananda cleaned up the monk, gave him a bath, they gave him new robes to wear, and then kind of just clean up his room. And he basically summoned the whole community. It was like, "You monks are all brothers and sisters. You are your family, so you have to take care of each other. If you don't take care of each other, who's going to take care of you?" Right? So it's the same way in our Sangha. If you try to go out and venture on your own and try to study by yourself, again, you can do that for quite some time, but ultimately everyone may get stuck at one point, whether it's being stuck on a specific teaching or practice, they don't really know what to do next, or they may just come to an end where they think, "Okay, I know everything, and there's really not much more to know," which is false, because you can never know it all, right? But the Sangha is there to support. The monastics are here to support the lay people, and the lay people are here to support us, and we're all kind of supporting each other, right? And another thing about taking refuge, it's also about self-faith. So faith, right, is common between all major religions. But faith in Buddhism is a little bit different, because it's not necessarily blind faith, right? We're not hoping that when we die we're being born in heaven, or we may be born in hell, right? Like teacher says, if you don't believe me, then you're going to go to hell. Talking about other religions. But it's not like that, because faith here, same way when we're praying, for instance, to the Buddhas or the Bodhisattvas, we're not praying directly to them. We're not asking them for something. We're not trying to acquire some knowledge or health or wealth or whatever else. We're not there to grant us wishes. When we pray, we are, like when we get to the section of invoking the Bodhisattva's names, if you read through it and really listen mindfully and pay attention to what you're saying, what you're reciting is just the characteristics of what makes that Bodhisattva so great, right? So the Bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokiteshvara, she is there to support all living beings. If someone needs help, if they are in desperate need of guidance or whatever, we are reciting the characteristics of what makes her so great. So when we are in a situation where we may be in danger, or if we're just kind of needing guidance or whatever, and we invoke the Bodhisattva's name, and we just say, Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. When we're reciting that, what we're trying to do is just bring to mind the characteristics of that bodhisattva, because we want to embody those. We want to develop those characteristics and those merits and those virtues that create that bodhisattva to be so great into ourselves. So, so when we are taking refuge in the three jewels, when we are bowing, when we are invoking the names, when we are praying, this is all self-faith within ourselves. It's not faith in some external thing, hoping it'll make us better. It is faith in within ourselves. We have to have faith in the practice, right? It's Buddhism or meditation or the Dharma is not a pill that you can just swallow and assume everything's going to be better the next day, right? It is something that will take time. And I always emphasize this in meditation classes, like you can't meditate off and on, right, as a hobby. It has to be consistent. It has to be a diligent practice, because that is the only way you're going to bear any positive fruit from it, right? You're not going to be able to gain anything from it if you're not consistently practicing, if you're not consistently helping yourself develop what you're trying to achieve. So it's the same way in our practice. So we have to have faith in the practice. We have to have faith in ourselves that we are able to practice it. We're able to practice diligently the practices of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, and really believe in ourselves, believe in the practice. Because the Buddha himself told his monks, you know, just because I'm the Buddha, you really don't got to believe me, right? I could be just spreading fake news. But unless you yourself practice it and you've benefited from it, then it's true. It's a true practice. It's a true Dharma. If you don't benefit from it, then okay, move on to something else, right? Which is why we have 84,000 Dharma doors, right? We have 84,000 ways of doing things. So if one doesn't work, move on to the next. But in the same token, because Buddhism and the Dharma is so vast and huge, right? There's so many different teachings and sutras and commentaries and everything else, that if we don't practice it correctly, if we don't study correctly, which is why we really need the guidance of a teacher or the Sangha, it's very easy to get lost. It's very easy to get confused by the different many plethora of teachings out there. And if we try to skip steps too quickly, if we try to go skip the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path and go right to emptiness and the psychology and Abhidharma and all that stuff, then you're going to get so lost and confused that you're really just going to hurt yourself, and you're going to feel kind of discouraged and may even give up, right? And that tends to happen with a lot of people for meditation. It's because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing to begin with, that they think they're doing meditation wrong and they're not really benefiting from it, or nothing's really happening, right? So they give up in meditation. But you may feel like that for weeks, months, maybe even years, right? And it's because our mind has depending on how old we are, right? You've spent 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 years with habitual thinking, right? So we are habitually thinking, we're habitually judging, we're habitually, throwing our own perceptions onto things and situations and scenarios, that it's false thinking, it's a false way of doing things. And because that's such a habit, when we're meditating, we're trying to stop that from happening, right? We're trying to stop the habitual bias that we have towards people or things. We're trying to stop the habitual judging and characterizing and stereotyping, right? We're trying to stop all that within meditation. And it's not going to be easy. It is very, very difficult. But when we practice meditation, if we do it correctly, if we practice the techniques correctly, then those habitual thinking and thoughts and all the other stuff will slowly slow down, right? They may not ever stop completely, which is fine, right? But we can slow them down. We can be able to identify and acknowledge that they're there. And that's really the point of meditation, is to identify when you're thinking, is to acknowledge when you're thinking, is to catch that thinking, right? Because our mind is obsessed with time. is obsessed with the past and it's obsessed with the future. And so when you try to be mindful and you bring your mind to the present, your mind's like, oh, no, 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 no. Let's go back to that thing that happened 5 years ago, right? Or let's go think about tomorrow's dinner plan or something, right? So when that happens, our mind's like, oh, heck no. It tries to shovel its way out, right? But that's what we try. That's what we're trying to achieve, is to stop the thinking from past and future and bring it back to the present. And it's very difficult because our mind's like, oh no, I don't like the taste of that. And so it tries to distract you and kind of take you away. So that's what I always say when I always try to reintroduce meditation during the classes. And I always tell everyone that it's okay to think. It's okay to get distracted. It's not okay to not identify the distraction. It's not okay to hang on to the distraction and entertain it and go on, right? Which may happen, which will happen, right? But as long as you're able to identify it, whether it's 1 second, 10 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes within it, as long as you're able to catch it and see it and bring yourself back to your meditation object, that's totally fine. Spend 30 minutes being distracted. But if by end of 30 minutes you haven't realized you're distracted, then you've wasted 30 minutes. So almost now it's been a year, right? During the meditation classes, we've gone over, I don't know, like 9 or 10 different ways, techniques, and methods. So find one that works for you, and have to go from there. But meditating on the breath and counting the breath is the oldest and most traditional way, right? It's if we read the Anapanasati Sutra, which is the sutra that we chant during our meditation retreats, it gives you 16 practices, but the first 4 is what we typically concentrate on, because it's allowing you to be mindful of the breathing in and out, whether it's long or short, it's heavy or shallow, whatever, right? You always want to meditate on the breath, because the breath is with you wherever you go. It's with you until the day you die, right? You can try to, if you're trying to meditate on other things, right, you can meditate on a candle flame, you can meditate on a picture, you can meditate on anything else, right? But you may not be able to necessarily take those with you if you are traveling or whatever. So we always use the breath, because the breath is life, right? That's what creates our life. So it's it's easiest. And I still count my breath when I'm meditating. 16 years later, I'm still doing counting, because it's very important. And it may sometimes become boring, right? You're like, okay, I'm just counting, and nothing's happening, because it's so routine. But that's one of the hindrances. That's a hindrance. There's 5 hindrances, right? And I forgot what the actual wording is called, but transliterating it basically is being bored, right, during meditation. I think it's the 3rd or 4th hindrance. But the reason we're being bored is because we're not being mindful enough. We're not being concentrated enough. Because if you really are correctly meditating and you're correctly concentrating and being mindful, then there's no past and no future. So if you're sitting there like, oh my gosh, when are we going to be over, right? When's the bell going to ring? When are we going to stop meditating? And you're thinking, man, it's been like at least 45 minutes and it's only been 6 minutes or something, right? Sometimes we think like that. Sometimes I'm thinking like that, because we meditate for at least 3 hours a day. So I'm like, I just want to stop. My back hurts or whatever, right? But the reason those thoughts come up is because we're not really being mindful. We're not concentrating enough. And sometimes you have to really intensely concentrate in order for it to work. But that can also be a bad thing sometimes too, because you don't want to force it in a way, right? Because if you can really sit there and close your eyes and like tense up your whole body, and then your eyes start hurting, or your neck starts seizing or something, some weird stuff happens, right? But we really have to work on the concentration part, on being mindful. Because as long as we're being mindful, if we're enjoying our breathing, right? Because as we're breathing, we have to also pick a place of concentration. So whether you are concentrating as you're breathing, whether you're concentrating on the air going in and out of your nostrils, at the tip of your nose, or if you're feeling the air going down your throat or into your lungs as it expands, or the abdomen as it extends, right? You have to pick a place to also concentrate when you're meditating. So if you're concentrating hard enough, good enough, and you're being mindful of the movements, of the sensations, of the way the air feels, the shallowness of your breath, the coldness or the warmth of the air, and you're continued to be mindful that way, then you're not, hopefully, won't be bored, right? You won't be thinking, when is this going to stop? But at the same time, as we meditate, right, I always tell you, you can meditate for 5-10 minutes, it's perfectly fine, because it's about the quality of meditation, not about the quantity of how much. So you may have a better meditation session doing it 5 minutes versus doing it 45 to 60 minutes, right? Because you're not concentrating enough, you're not doing the right things. And for me, sometimes when I'm meditating, because we have at least 3 sessions a day of meditation, the afternoon sessions usually the most difficult for me because I'm kind of exhausted, I'm tired, right? I need a nap, so I maybe kind of like doze in and out of the session. But sometimes you really have to be able to gauge yourself at the same time. You really have to know where you're at in the process. You have to know where you're at in the kind of level of meditation, right? So if you're meditating and you get to a point where you just can't concentrate, you can't be mindful, it's not working, right, in a way. I suggest just to end your session, right? There's no point in just entertaining thoughts and being distracted for an hour, 30 minutes, 15 minutes, when it's really not a good session. It's not quality meditation. So you may just want to end your session there, and either take a nap, or you may just need to eat something, or be a little active and go back. For me, when that happens, I typically just get up and do walking meditation for at least 15 minutes. And that usually, because it's moving your body, it's getting your blood flowing, right? You're moving around, you're getting some physical activity happening, and that usually helps. How do I get from meditation from the 3 refuge? I don't know. Okay, I'm going to stop there because it's already been 30 minutes and I'm talking off topic. But, okay, I'm going to stop there because I can go on and on. Y'all know I can go on and on. So I'm going to stop there. Any questions? Same thing for the folks online. If you have any questions, as usual, feel free to leave them in the comments or send us an email. I'm usually responsive within at least a day or 2, max. But feel free to send us questions, any comments, or emotional outbursts. But for those of you that are here, any questions? Okay. So we will stop there, and we'll go to transfer the merit and go into chanting. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. For any positive karmic action we've accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merit to all sentient beings and wish them full enlightenment. So I'm just going to our general chanting. For those online, you may, if you have the book, please follow along. Otherwise, you will be able to download the chants online from our website. body, speech, and mind in perfect oneness. I send my heart along with the sound of the. May the hearers awaken from forgetfulness and transcend all anxiety and sorrow. Listen, listen, this wonderful sound brings me back to my true home. In gratitude we offer this incense to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout space, and may it be fragrant as earth herself, reflecting our careful efforts, our wholehearted mindful, and the fruit of understanding slowly ripening. May we and all beings become Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. May we awaken from forgetfulness and realize our true home. The incense in the censer now is burning. All the Dharma realm in every place. Auspicious clouds appear. Our sincere intention thus fulfilling, as all Buddhas now show their perfect body. Homage to the incense cloud canopy, Bodhisattva and great Bodhisattvas. Homage to the eternally abiding Buddhas, the supreme Dharma insatiably sung throughout the Dharma realm and the realm of empty space and 3 periods of time. Homage to the fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha, Maitreya, honor future Buddha, The Great Compassion Mantra with 1,000 hands and 1,000 eyes are on you runs like this. Namo Ratnatrayaya Namo Arya Avalokita Shavaraya Bodhisattvaya Mahasattvaya Mahakarunikaya Om Savalavati Sudanastasya Namaskritva Namanarya Avalokita Shavaralantaba Namo Nilakanta Shri Mahapata Shami Sarvadata Shobham Ashiyom Sarva Sattva Namo Pasava Namo Bhagama Bhatetu Tadyata Om Avalokalo Kalati Ishiri Mahabodhisattva Sabo Sabo Mara Mashi Mashiridayu Goro Goro Gamyan Doro Doro Bashyati Mahabashyati Dara Dara Dirini Shvaraya Jala Jala Mahabamara Modhilehi Ehi Shina Shina Alashin Balashari Basha Basnin Barashaya Holo Holo Pra Holo Holo Shri Sara Sara Siri Siri Soro Soro Bodaya 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 Maitreya Nilakansa Trisharana Vayamare Swaha Siddhaya Swaha Mahasiddhaya Swaha Siddhaya Ye Shvaraya Swaha Nilakante Swaha Pranira Swaha Shisimahukaya Swaha Sarva Mahasataya Swaha Chakrahasaya Swaha Padmakeshaya Swaha Nilakantam Pantalaya Swaha Mofodi Shankaraya Namo Ratnatrayaya Namo Arya Avalokite Shavaraya Swaha Om Siryanto Mandrapadaya Swaha. The Dharma body is bringing morning light and concentration. My heart is at peace. A half smile is born on my lips. This is a new day and I vow to go through it in mindful. The sun of wisdom has risen, shining in every direction. Noble Sangha, diligently bring your mind. Meditation. Namo Shakyamunaye Bodhaya. Namo Shakyamunaye Bodhaya. Namo Shakyamunaye Bodhaya. The one who bows and the one who is bowed to are both by nature empty. Therefore the communication between them is inexpressibly pure. Our practice center is the net of Indra, reflecting all Buddhas everywhere, as my own person reflects in all Buddhas, to whom with my whole life I go for refuge. Offering light in the 10 directions, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha to suffering, serving beings in countless ways. Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of great compassion, to whom we bow gratitude. Working mindfully, working joyfully for the sake of all beings. Samantabhadra, the Bodhisattva of great action, to bowing gratitude. Seed of awakening and loving kindness in children, sprouts and all beings. Maitreya, the Buddha, to be born, to whom we bow in gratitude. Showing the way fearlessly and compassionately, the stream of all our ancestral teachers, to whom we bow in gratitude. The Dharma is deep and lovely. We now have a chance to see it and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning. The Bodhisattva Avalokita, while moving in the deep course of perfect understanding, shed light on the five skandhas and found them equally empty. After this penetration, he overcame ill-beingness and shy. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is not other than emptiness, emptiness is not other than form. The same is true with feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Listen, child. All dharmas are marked with emptiness. They are neither produced nor destroyed, neither defiled nor immaculate, neither increasing nor decreased. Therefore in emptiness there is neither form nor feelings, no perceptions nor mental formation, nor consciousness, no eye or ear or nose or tongue. Form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realms of elements, no interdependent origins, and no extinction of them, no ill-being, no cause of ill-being, no end of ill-being, no path, no understanding, no attainment, because there is no attainment. The Bodhisattva's ground in perfect understanding, find no obstacles. Minds having no obstacles, they overcome fear, liberating themselves forever from illusion and realizing perfect nirvana. All Buddhas in the past, present, and future are right and universal enlightenment. Therefore one should know that perfect understanding is the highest mantra, unequal mantra, the destroyer of ill-being, the incorruptible truth. The mantra of prajna paramita should therefore be proclaimed. Gate gate para gate para sam bodhi swaha. Gate gate para gate para sam gate bodhi swaha. Gate gate para gate para sam bodhi swaha. We invoke your name, Avalokiteshvara. We aspire to learn your way of listening in order to help relieve the suffering in the world. You know how to. In order to understand, we invoke your name in order to practice listening with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will sit and listen without any Samanta Bhadra. We aspire to practice your vow to act with the eyes and heart of compassion, to bring joy to one person in the morning and to ease the pain of one person in the afternoon. We know that the happiness of is our own happiness, and we aspire to practice joy on the path of service. We know that every word, every look, every action, and every smile can bring happiness to us. We know that if we practice wholeheartedly, we ourselves may become an inexhaustible source of peace and loved ones and for all species. We invoke your name, Shiti Gadva. We aspire to learn your way of being present where there is darkness, oppression, and despair, so we can bring relief and liberation to those places. We are determined not to forget about or abandon those in desperate situations. We will do our best to establish contact with those who cannot find a way out of their suffering, those whose cries for help, justice, equality, and human rights are not being heard. We know that hell can be found in many places on earth. We will do our best not to contribute to create hells on earth and to help transform the hells that already exist. We will practice in order to realize equality, perseverance, and stability, so that like the earth we can always be supportive and faithful to those in need. I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and of love. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. Dwelling in the refuge of Buddha, I clearly see the path of light and beauty and love. Dwelling in the refuge of Dharma, I learn to open many doors on the path transformation. Dwelling in the refuge of Sangha, shining light the support, keeping my practice free of obstruction. Taking refuge in the Buddha, in myself I aspire to help all people recognize their own awakened nature, realizing the mind of love. Taking refuge in the Dharma, in myself I aspire to help all people fully master the ways of practice and walk together on the path of liberation. Taking refuge in the Sangha, in myself I aspire to help all people build fourfold communities to embrace all beings and support their transformation. chanting the sutras, practicing the way of awareness, gives rise to benefits without limit. We vow to share the fruits with all beings. We vow to offer tribute to parents, teachers, friends, and numerous beings who give guidance and support along the